The cold beginning. The snowstorm raged across the desolate landscape, a harsh wind whipping the cold air into sharp needles. A small alien girl, no bigger than a child, struggled against the fury of the storm. Her skin, a pale blue hue, was nearly invisible against the white snow. Each step she took was slower than the last. The weight of the cold pressed on her fragile body, making it harder to move, harder to breathe. Her breaths came in ragged gasps, each one leaving a mist of vapor that vanished into the frigid air. The alien girl was small, far smaller than the creatures of her kind, and the snow around her was deep, nearly up to her waist. Her feet were freezing, her body weak from exhaustion, and her heart felt like it might stop any moment. But still, she walked, her eyes scanning the horizon for anything that might help her survive. She had been separated from her group hours ago, lost in the storm. They had told her to stay close, warned her of the dangers of the cold world they had crash-landed on. But in the chaos, in the panic of the crash, she had been pushed away, her small form carried by the wind and tossed into the deep snow. Now, she was alone. As the cold sank deeper into her bones, she stumbled, her vision blurred. It was hard to tell if the world was spinning because of the storm or because her body was shutting down. Her legs gave out beneath her and she fell to the ground, the snow quickly covering her body. She tried to push herself up, but the cold made it feel like her limbs were made of stone. She needed warmth. She needed help. But there was no one here. The thought crossed her mind again and again, but there was no answer. Only the endless snow and the howling wind. She closed her eyes for just a moment, hoping that sleep would take her, hoping the cold would stop hurting. But the darkness that followed was even colder. A sound, a faint sound, barely audible over the storm, caught her attention. At first she thought it was just the wind, another trick of the blizzard, but it was different. There it was again. A steady crunch of footsteps in the snow. Slow, careful steps. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be someone? Could it be help? Her mind swirled with the possibility. Her body screamed at her to stay, awake. But she could feel herself fading, the cold sinking deeper. Yet the sound kept coming closer and she forced her eyes open, hoping against hope that she wasn't imagining it. Through the snow, a figure emerged. At first it was just a shadow, hard to make out in the whiteout conditions. But then it took shape. A human, a tall figure wrapped in thick, dark clothing, moving steadily through the storm. The girl's heart pounded in her chest. She had seen humans before, though she had never spoken to one. They were strange, unfamiliar beings, but they weren't as cold as her people had warned her. She had never thought one would find her out here in the middle of nowhere. The figure got closer and the alien girl tried to lift her arm, to wave, to signal for help, but her strength was gone. The snow seemed to close in on her once again, and she collapsed onto the ground, her head resting in the cold snow. She could no longer move. Then, a hand, warm, strong, and gentle, reached out to her. The human knelt down beside her, speaking softly in a language she didn't understand. She couldn't focus on the words, but there was something about the tone that made her feel safe. His voice was calming, as if he were trying to comfort her, though she couldn't grasp the meaning of his words. She looked up at him through the snowflakes swirling around them, her vision hazy. His face was kind, his eyes full of concern, and in that moment she didn't feel alone anymore. It wasn't just the warmth of his hand that she felt. It was the warmth of something else, something she had never known before. A true, selfless kindness. The human pulled out something from his bag, a thick, heavy blanket. He wrapped it around her fragile form, shielding her from the cold. The alien girl flinched at first, unsure of the strange warmth, but the comfort quickly sank in. The blanket, the warmth, it felt like life itself. She could feel her body slowly responding to the heat, the cold starting to fade, though her limbs still ached. The human stayed close to her, not saying much, but his presence was enough. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't demand anything. He simply helped. And for the first time in her life, the alien girl didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel like she was in the way. In that moment, she was just someone worth saving. The wind howled, but she no longer cared about it. The snowstorm seemed far away now. All that mattered was the warmth she felt, both from the blanket and from the human beside her. The cold was still there, but it no longer had the power to freeze her spirit. The human had saved her, and for that, she would never forget. The first act of kindness. The alien girl's body trembled as the warmth of the blanket wrapped tightly around her fragile form. Her teeth chattered, but the cold was not as intense as it had been before. The human had given her something she had never experienced before: comfort. It wasn't just the physical warmth from the blanket that made her feel better. It was the sense that someone cared for her, that she wasn't just another weak creature lost in the snow. Her eyes struggled to stay open, the exhaustion from the storm weighing on her small frame. The human, despite his own fatigue, sat by her side, keeping a watchful eye on her. His presence was steady and reassuring, like a rock against the furious winds. The alien girl could feel his gaze upon her, but it was not one of judgment or curiosity. It was a gaze filled with concern, a simple act of kindness that she had never known from others of her kind. The human didn't rush her. He didn't try to get her to speak or move too quickly. He understood that the alien girl needed time to recover. His kindness was a silent promise, one she didn't quite understand yet, but couldn't deny. As the minutes passed, the girl's mind wandered. She could still hear the howling wind outside, but now it seemed distant. The warmth of the blanket soothed her, and slowly her breathing returned to a normal pace. But her thoughts raced. Who was this human? Why had he come to her aid in the middle of nowhere, in a storm so brutal that most would never survive? Surely there had to be a reason. She had heard stories from the other aliens. Humans were not known for their kindness, at least not to her kind. They were often seen as selfish, cold, only out for their own interests. Yet here was this human, giving up his warmth, his time, and his comfort without asking for anything in return. It was something she had never seen before. Could this human be different? Or was this just some trick, a form of manipulation? She couldn't tell yet, but she knew she felt something, a warmth inside her heart that she hadn't known existed before. After a long while, the human spoke softly, his voice breaking the silence. "You're safe now," he said. His words were simple, but they filled the alien girl's chest with a strange sense of peace. She tried to respond, but no words came out. Her throat was dry, and her voice was lost somewhere in the depths of the cold. Still, she nodded faintly, letting him know she had heard. The human noticed the look in her eyes, as though she were trying to speak but couldn't. With a soft smile, he reached into his bag again and pulled out a small flask. He offered it to her, and she hesitated for just a moment before taking it. The liquid inside was warm, unlike anything she had ever tasted. It was sweet, almost comforting, and it slid down her throat like a healing balm. Her body relaxed, her muscles loosening, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel cold anymore. The human watched her closely, his eyes never leaving her. He was patient, as though he knew that healing wasn't just about warmth or food. It was about trust. The alien girl took a deep breath, feeling stronger with each passing second. Her mind cleared, and she found herself thinking more clearly than she had in what seemed like an eternity. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. The words felt strange coming from her lips, but they were true. She didn't know how to express it, how to explain what she was feeling. No one had ever shown her such kindness, not even her own people. The human smiled softly at her, though his eyes were filled with something else, something deeper, like a glimmer of understanding. He didn't need her words to know that she was grateful. He had seen it in the way she looked at him, in the way her body had relaxed under his care. As the storm continued to rage outside, the human moved closer to the fire. He placed a few more logs on it, and the warmth in the small shelter grew. The alien girl shifted under the blanket, feeling her strength return. She was still weak, but the sense of safety she now felt with the human by her side made her want to believe that everything would be okay. For once, she wasn't alone. The human continued to keep watch, but his movements were calm, unhurried. He wasn't the kind of person who rushed, and that made the alien girl feel secure. He didn't push her to talk, to explain who she was or where she came from. He simply sat beside her, letting the silence speak for itself. But as the hours passed, the alien girl's thoughts began to darken once again. Despite the human's kindness, despite the warmth he had offered her, there were still dangers lurking in the cold world outside. Her people, her kind, didn't live in this part of the galaxy for a reason. It was a place of survival, a place where trust was scarce. And yet here was this human, someone who should have been her enemy, showing her a kindness that seemed to go against everything she had ever known. The warmth of chill of uncertainty creeping into her chest. What if he was a threat? What if he was trying to get information from her, trying to use her weakness against her? She had to stay alert. She had to stay strong. Her instincts told her to be careful, but another part of her, the part she didn't want to admit, longed to trust him. But that was a dangerous thing. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. As the night grew deeper, the alien girl looked at the human once more. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like there might be a future worth living for, one filled with warmth, one where she could be seen, not as an outcast, but as someone who mattered. And as the storm outside continued its relentless howl, the two of them, human and alien, sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, but united by a moment of unexpected kindness. The unknown path, the alien girl woke to the sound of crackling firewood. She opened her eyes slowly, her body feeling less heavy than before. The warmth from the fire had spread through the small shelter, making it feel like a haven from the storm that raged just beyond the walls. Her body ached, but the pain was no longer unbearable. She felt a strange mix of exhaustion and comfort, her senses tingling with a feeling she had never known. The human was still there, sitting by the fire, his figure casting long shadows on the walls of the cave. He didn't notice that she had woken up. His gaze was focused on the flames, his hands idly poking at the fire with a stick. The alien girl studied him for a moment. He looked different now, softer, more human. She had been so caught up in her fear and confusion before, but now she saw him with clearer eyes, eyes that had seen a side of him she hadn't expected. Compassion. She felt something stir in her chest, a flutter of gratitude, and perhaps something more, a curiosity, a connection. Could this be real? Could a human really be this kind? Her mind told her it was impossible, that no one, especially not a human, could be this selfless. But her heart told her otherwise. The human finally turned his attention back to her. His eyes, though tired, still held that warmth, that quiet assurance. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice soft, as though he already knew the answer. It wasn't the question itself that caught the alien girl off guard. It was the way he asked it, with such care, such genuine concern. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry, still sore from the harsh cold of the storm. She cleared her throat gently, then nodded, unsure of what to say. "Better," she whispered, the word barely escaping her lips. It was the truth, but it wasn't the whole truth. The human nodded in response, giving her a small smile. He reached for something beside him, a bundle of dried fruit, and offered it to her. She hesitated for just a moment before taking it, her fingers trembling as she grasped the small offering. The fruit was sweet, filling her mouth with a comforting taste that she hadn't realized she had missed. As she ate, she studied the human more closely. The longer she spent in his presence, the more questions arose in her mind. Why had he helped her? Humans didn't usually help their enemies, did they? She had always been taught that they were selfish, that they only cared about themselves, about their own survival. And yet, here he was, offering her food, warmth, and safety without asking for anything in return. She couldn't understand it, but then again, she wasn't sure if she understood herself anymore. She had always been taught to be cautious, to be wary of strangers. But the human didn't seem like the others. There was no hidden agenda in his actions, no manipulation behind his kindness. He was simply kind. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Outside the cave, the wind howled louder, and a low rumble echoed through the air. The human immediately stood, his expression changing from calm to alert in an instant. The alien girl stiffened, sensing the change in the air, her instincts telling her that something was coming, something dangerous. The human's eyes darted toward the entrance of the cave, his hand instinctively going to the small weapon he carried, at his side. The alien girl felt a wave of unease wash over her. What was happening? Why was he so tense all of a sudden? "Stay here," the human said quietly, his voice firm, but with a trace of concern. He didn't wait for a response. Before the alien girl could ask him what was happening, he was already moving toward the entrance, his steps quick but measured. She wanted to follow him, to find out what was going on, but something held her back. She knew she wasn't strong enough to help, not yet. And so she stayed by the fire, her eyes fixed on the human as he disappeared into the blizzard outside. The wind howled louder as she waited, the silence in the cave now deafening. Every second felt like an eternity. Her heart raced and she could feel the anxiety building inside her. Was the human in danger? What was out there in the snowstorm? Minutes passed, but to the alien girl, it felt like hours. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. What if the storm was hiding something? What if the human had led her into even greater danger? Her thoughts spiraled as she sat in the dark cave, her breath shallow, her eyes scanning the entrance, waiting for the human to return. Then there was a sound, a distant thud, followed by a sharp crack. Her heart skipped a beat. Was that the human? Had something happened to him? She couldn't wait any longer. Her body moved on its own, and before she knew it, she was standing, walking toward the entrance of the cave. The cold hit her immediately, sharper than it had ever felt before. The snowstorm was even worse now, the wind pushing her back with each step she took. She squinted into the snow, trying to make out any figure in the distance, but the blizzard made it nearly impossible to see. Then she heard it again. A voice, faint but clear above the roar of the storm. It was the human. He was shouting, but his voice was strained as though he was fighting against something. "Get back!" he yelled, and then there was a grunt of effort, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. The alien girl's heart pounded in her chest. Without thinking, she pushed forward, stumbling through the snow toward the human's voice. Her strength was almost gone, but the need to help, no, the need to understand, pushed her forward. Just as she reached the entrance of the cave, she saw him. The human was standing, facing a large, menacing figure, a creature unlike any she had seen before. It was tall, with thick, armored skin, and eyes that glowed faintly in the storm's darkness. It was hunting them, and the human, despite the danger, stood his ground. A bond forms. The alien girl stood frozen in place, her eyes locked on the scene before her. The human was facing the enormous creature, the towering beast that loomed like a shadow in the swirling snowstorm. Its breath came in ragged gusts, mist forming in the frigid air. The creature's eyes gleamed like two fiery embers, glowing ominously in the dark. It was clear that this wasn't just any beast, it was a predator, a hunter of the worst kind. The human's posture was firm, unyielding. Despite the fact that the creature was clearly far stronger and more dangerous than him, he stood between it and the alien girl, an unwilling shield. His weapon, a small but sharp tool that had barely seen any use until now, was aimed directly at the creature's chest. It didn't seem like much, not against the beast's towering presence, but the alien girl couldn't help but feel that there was more to this human than met the eye. He was not afraid. The air was thick with tension. The beast's growl cut through the howling wind, low and threatening. It took a step forward, its massive paws crushing the snow beneath it. But the human didn't back down. Instead, his gaze shifted, his eyes meeting the alien girl's. In that brief moment, she saw something she hadn't expected. Fear, yes, but also determination. He wasn't fighting to save himself. He was fighting to protect her. "Stay back," the human said, his voice low but commanding. His words were barely audible over the roar of the storm, but they carried a weight the alien girl couldn't ignore. She hesitated, unsure of what to do. He was telling her to stay back, to remain hidden, but her instincts screamed at her to help, to do something, anything, to help him. But she knew she wasn't strong enough. Not yet. The creature growled again, taking another step forward, and the human stepped into its path, his stance unshaken. There was no room for negotiation, no room for retreat. The beast's eyes narrowed. As it sized him up, its muscles tensing. It was about to make its move, to strike, but the human was ready. In that instant, the alien girl knew what he was doing. He wasn't going to fight the creature in the way one might expect. He wasn't going to use force. Instead, he was using his mind, his determination to force the beast into submission. He had no choice. There was no other option. She watched as the human took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing, focusing entirely on the creature. In the blink of an eye, he lunged forward, grabbing hold of the creature's thick fur with both hands, using all his strength to steer its attention away from the girl. He was fast, faster than she had anticipated, and in the chaos of the moment he managed to land a well-placed blow to the creature's side, just enough to knock it off balance. The beast roared in fury, but instead of attacking, it staggered back, seemingly surprised by the human's unexpected strength. The alien girl's breath caught in her throat as she realized what was happening. He was outsmarting it. The human used the momentary confusion to his advantage. He quickly grabbed a nearby rock, its sharp edges glinting in the dim light. Without a second thought, he hurled it toward the beast's eyes, temporarily blinding it. The creature howled in pain, shaking its head violently. It was vulnerable just for a moment, but that moment was enough. The human didn't hesitate. He ran toward the alien girl, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her back into the cave. "Move!" he shouted urgently, his eyes wild with adrenaline. She followed, unsure of what would happen next, but trusting him despite the chaos surrounding them. Once they were safely inside the cave, the human slammed the entrance shut, blocking the snowstorm's fury. They were safe. For now. The alien girl's heart was pounding in her chest. She looked up at the human, her breath shallow. He was breathing heavily, his face grim, but there was no sign of fear in his eyes. If anything, there was a new strength in them, a strength that made her believe for the first time that they might actually survive this. He had done the impossible. He had protected her. The human collapsed onto the ground, resting for a moment, his body still shaking with the after-effects of the fight. The alien girl knelt beside him, unsure of how to react. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply sat there, watching him as he recovered. He looked at her then, his eyes softening. "You're safe," he said, his voice hoarse from the exertion. "You're not alone anymore." The alien girl's chest tightened at the words. It was simple. So simple. But in that moment, they meant everything. She had been alone for so long, forced to fight for every scrap of survival. But now, with this human by her side, everything had changed. She wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't just a survivor. She was someone worth fighting for. And for the first time in a long time, the alien girl felt a spark of hope ignite within her. There was something in the human's actions, something that told her they could make it out of this alive together. He wasn't just offering her warmth and safety. He was offering her a chance at something more. The storm outside was fierce, but inside the cave a new kind of storm was brewing, a storm of emotions, of trust and uncertainty, of a bond that was forming between two beings who should have been enemies. But in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was that they had each other. The truth revealed. The wind outside howled like a beast in the night, but inside the cave a tense silence had settled. The alien girl sat near the flickering fire, her eyes fixed on the human who was still catching his breath. His body was bruised, the signs of his battle with the creature clearly visible. Scrapes and cuts, his clothes torn from the struggle. Yet despite the pain, there was something in his eyes, something that had shifted. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He had become her protector. The human noticed her watching him and gave a small smile, though it was tinged with exhaustion. "It's not over yet," he said, his voice steady but laced with a weariness she hadn't heard before. The alien girl's heart sank. The danger outside was still real. She could feel the threat lurking in the storm, and her instincts screamed at her to stay alert, to be ready. But even as she felt the weight of their situation, there was a part of her that couldn't deny it. There was something different about this human. The more she saw him, the more she realized that he wasn't like the others. She had been taught to fear humans, to distrust them above all others. But now, after everything, she wasn't so sure. The human's eyes narrowed as he stood up slowly, stretching his arms and wincing. He moved to the entrance of the cave and peered outside, his posture tense. He didn't speak immediately, but his gaze was sharp, scanning the storm's edge like a predator watching its prey. The alien girl watched him, curiosity bubbling in her chest. She needed to understand. Why had he helped her? Why had he fought the beast, risking his life for someone like her? After a long moment, the human turned back to face her, his expression hardening. "There's more to this than you think," he said quietly. "The creature out there wasn't just a random monster. It's part of something bigger, something dangerous." The alien girl's eyes widened in surprise. She had assumed the beast was just another part of the wild environment, a natural threat. But now the human was saying something different, something darker. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Though her body had begun to regain strength, her mind was still reeling from the battle, from the storm, from the uncertainty of it all. The human's gaze darkened as he walked back toward her. "This world, this place, it's not as empty as it seems. There's a reason you were stranded here. There's a reason we were both brought here." His words hung heavy in the air, each one adding weight to the already oppressive tension between them. "What do you know about this place?" The alien girl pressed, her voice barely a whisper. She had never heard this side of the human before. It was as though he held knowledge that was beyond her comprehension, as though he knew something she didn't. The human sighed, sitting down beside her once more, his gaze distant. "This planet is more than just a cold, lifeless rock. It's a crossroads, a place where many different paths meet, paths that lead to war, to destruction, to chaos." He paused, looking at her. "The storm out there? It's not just weather, it's a warning. Something is coming, something much worse than that creature." The alien girl's heart began to race. The storm, the beast, all of it. It wasn't just random, it was connected. "What are we supposed to do?" she asked, the fear she had tried to suppress breaking through. She had spent so much time just trying to survive, just trying to make it through the next day, that the idea of a larger threat, something beyond her control, felt like too much to bear. The human looked at her with an intensity she had never seen before. "We fight," he said simply. "We survive. And we stop whatever's coming." The alien girl's mind raced. She didn't understand fully, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about her survival anymore. It was about something much bigger. Something that threatened not only her life but the lives of everything on this planet. But how? How can we fight something we don't even know? She asked, feeling the weight of the world settling on her shoulders. She had no weapons, no allies, nothing but the human beside her. "By trusting each other," the human replied softly. "By working together, we're stronger than we know, and together, we can survive anything." The alien girl looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He wasn't just a human, He was someone who had risked everything to protect her, someone who was offering her hope when all she had known was despair. His words resonated with something deep inside her, a spark of courage, a flicker of something she hadn't felt in so long. She nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling in her chest. Together, she repeated. The word felt strange, but also comforting. It was a promise, a pact, one she didn't know if she was ready for, but one she was willing to take. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them and the alien girl's heart skipped a beat. She looked toward the entrance, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. The storm outside had changed again. It wasn't just the wind anymore. It was something more. The human stood up quickly, his eyes sharp with urgency. "Get ready," he said, his voice steady. "They're coming." The alien girl felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know who or what they were, but she knew one thing for sure. They were not going to wait for them to be ready. The human grabbed her arm gently but firmly, his eyes locked on hers. "Stay close. No matter what happens, don't leave my side." And just like that, everything shifted. The calm before the storm was over. The fight was beginning and there was no turning back. The unexpected danger. The wind outside was no longer just a distant howling. It was a roar, a deafening scream that shook the very walls of the cave. The alien girl felt her pulse quicken as she stared at the human, his expression hard, his eyes narrowed with focused determination. Something was coming. Something worse than the creature they had faced earlier. She could feel it in her bones, in the way the air seemed to crackle with tension. The human moved with purpose, grabbing his weapon from the ground, checking it quickly. His movements were precise, professional. He had prepared for this moment, but even his readiness couldn't calm the gnawing fear that had begun to settle in her chest. The alien girl's heart raced. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The human didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood up, his gaze fixed on the storm outside, his body tense. It was clear he was listening for something. Waiting. But waiting for what? "They're here," he said, his voice low, almost grim. He turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mix of urgency and something darker. Something she had never seen before. "Get behind me now." Panic surged through the alien girl's veins. She didn't need to ask who they were. She already knew. Something far worse than the monster they had fought. Her body obeyed instinctively, scrambling to her feet and moving behind the human who stood as a silent protector. But what good would it do? She was weak, still recovering from the storm. She couldn't fight. She could barely even defend herself. The ground shook again, this time more violently. The sound of heavy footsteps, slow and deliberate, reverberated through the cave walls. The human's face was grim, his jaw tight with resolve. He adjusted his stance, getting ready for whatever was coming. His eyes flicked back to her for just a moment. "No matter what happens," he said firmly, "you stay hidden." The alien girl nodded, though fear twisted inside her chest. She knew what she had to do, but every fiber of her being screamed at her to run, to help, to not be the helpless one again. But she stayed behind the human, her body tense and ready, waiting for the danger to reveal itself. Then, through the storm's fury, they heard it, an ear-piercing screech, a sound that made the air feel thick with dread. It wasn't the growl of a creature, nor the roar of a storm. It was something far more sinister, something unnatural, something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. And then, they appeared. At first, they were just shadows, tall and hulking figures that moved like predators through the blizzard. Their eyes glowed with a sickly, unnatural light, and their silhouettes were hard to make out against the snowstorm, but there was no mistaking them. They were like nothing the alien girl had ever seen. Armored beings, their bodies encased in a strange metallic shell that shimmered ominously under the storm's rage. Their movements were calculated, purposeful, and they were closing in fast. The human's grip tightened on his weapon, his knuckles white with the pressure. "They're not just here to hunt. They're here for you," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. The alien girl's heart skipped a beat. "For me?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear. The human didn't answer, but she could see the understanding in his eyes. These creatures, these beings, weren't just after anyone. They were after her. Before she could ask anything more, the figure stepped forward, its voice cutting through the storm like a blade. "The child must come with us," it said in a cold, metallic tone. Its voice was amplified, robotic, and utterly alien. "She is required. Step aside." The human stood his ground, his body tense, his eyes never leaving the creature. "You're not taking her," he said with a firmness that surprised even the alien girl. "Not while I'm breathing." The alien girl's heart hammered in her chest. She had no idea what was going on, but she knew one thing for sure. These creatures meant to take her. And the human was willing to fight them. He was willing to die for her, even though they had only known each other for such a short time. The figures circled, their movements synchronized and eerie. The leader of the group stepped forward, its glowing eyes narrowing. "You cannot stop us," it said coldly. "You are nothing. She is everything." The human's expression hardened, his eyes flashing with defiance. "I will make sure you regret that." He raised his weapon, aiming it at the creature's chest, though it seemed almost futile against the armored beings. The alien girl's eyes flicked from one figure to another, the fear in her chest growing as the distance between them shrank. These weren't ordinary creatures, these were soldiers trained for one purpose, and that purpose was to capture her. Without warning, the leader lunged forward, its arms sweeping out to grab the human, but he dodged just in time, rolling to the side. The alien girl gasped as she watched him fight, his body quick and agile despite his injuries. He wasn't just trying to survive, he was trying to protect her, to keep her safe from whatever these beings were. In that moment, something inside the alien girl clicked. She wasn't helpless anymore. She wasn't just a survivor in the snow. These beings, these creatures, were coming for her, and she would not let them take her without a fight. She couldn't. Gritting her teeth, she stood up from her hiding place, her mind racing with thoughts of how she could help. She wasn't strong like the human, but she had something else, something these creatures couldn't anticipate. She had her own strength, her own will to survive, and she wouldn't let them take that away from her. Without thinking, she reached for the rock beside her, a large, jagged stone, and hurled it at the leader of the creatures. It struck the figure in the chest, and for a moment, the creature staggered back, surprised by the unexpected move. The human glanced back at her, his eyes wide with shock. "Stay back!" he shouted. But the alien girl shook her head, her heart pounding with purpose. She was done hiding. The battle between the human and the creatures raged on, a deadly dance of speed, skill, and desperation. The alien girl, though weak and injured, wasn't going to sit by and watch. She couldn't. Not after everything, not after all he had done for her. A new beginning, the cave was a battlefield. The air was thick with tension, the sounds of struggle echoing in the narrow space. The alien girl's heart pounded in her chest as she stood at the edge of the chaos. The human was locked in a fierce struggle with the lead creature, his every move quick, calculated, and precise. But even with his skill, the odds were stacked against him. The creature was larger, faster, and seemingly invincible in its armored shell. The alien girl couldn't stand by any longer. She had tried to stay hidden, tried to listen to the human's orders, but she knew now that the time for hiding was over. She had to act. For him. For herself. She moved quietly, her gaze never leaving the human's back. The creatures were relentless, and with each strike, the human's energy seemed to drain just a little more. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the toll that the fight was taking. He wasn't invincible. He was only human, but she wasn't going to let him fall. The alien girl gripped the rock in her hand, the jagged edges digging into her palm. She didn't hesitate this time. She sprinted toward the nearest creature, using the element of surprise to her advantage. With a swift, determined motion, she hurled the rock with all her might, aiming for the creature's exposed neck. It hit, with a sickening thud, and the creature let out an unnatural screech, its hand going to the wound. The human caught sight of her in the corner of his eye, a flicker of surprise flashing across his face. He didn't have time to react, though. The battle was far from over, but the alien girl's action had done something that shifted the balance of power. The creature staggered back, giving the human just enough time to launch himself at it with renewed fury. He grabbed hold of its arm, twisting it and forcing it into a vulnerable position. With one swift motion he struck, using the small but sharp weapon at his side to puncture the armor. The creature howled in pain, its body convulsing as it tried to fight back, but the human didn't let go. His determination was unyielding. The alien girl watched, her breath caught in her throat, as the human's weapon found its mark. With a final powerful strike, the creature crumpled to the ground, its body twitching before it went still. The human stepped back, breathing heavily, his face drawn with exhaustion. The alien girl felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was quickly replaced by a new sense of urgency. The other creatures were still coming. The storm outside was not their only threat. The beings that hunted her, hunted them both, were relentless, and she could feel their presence drawing closer. But something had changed. The human had fought with everything he had, and in doing so he had made her realize something. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for each other. And together, they stood a chance. The remaining creatures hesitated, for just a moment, seemingly taken aback by the human's victory. They had underestimated him. The alien girl could see it in their movements, uncertainty, doubt. But it didn't last long. They charged again, faster this time, more vicious. The human, his breath labored, turned toward the alien girl, his eyes meeting hers. "We need to get out of here," he said urgently. "There's no time. They won't stop coming." He didn't wait for her response. Instead, he grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back of the cave, where a small tunnel led to what looked like a hidden exit. The alien girl didn't ask questions. She trusted him. After everything, she had learned to trust him. The tunnel was narrow and dark, but it was their only hope. As they ran, the sounds of the battle faded behind them, replaced by the pounding of their own hearts. The alien girl could feel the weight of everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the fear. But there was something else too. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The exit of the cave opened up to a vast, snow-covered landscape. The storm had calmed slightly, though the wind still howled in the distance. But for the first time since they had arrived on this desolate world, the alien girl felt a sense of freedom. They had escaped. For now. But as they stepped into the open, the alien girl couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The creatures were still out there, still hunting them. And whatever these beings wanted with her, it wasn't over. The human, though exhausted and injured, kept walking, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We need to move quickly," he said, his voice steady. "We'll find shelter, regroup, but we need to keep going." The alien girl nodded, though she could feel the weight of their situation settling deep into her bones. There was so much they didn't know, so many unanswered questions. But one thing was certain: this human, this stranger, had changed everything. He had saved her life, and now he was her only hope. They continued walking through the snow, the cold biting at their skin, but there was warmth between them now. A bond forged through shared survival, through shared struggle. The alien girl didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were fighting for a future, together.